Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Good afternoon. Thank you for joining the digital edition of the fourth annual Capital Link event on decarbonization. My name is Dimitris Anassis. I'm a shipping disputes partner with Dickinson. I'm partner of the Piraeus office of the firm, and I'm very privileged to be joined today by Ricardo Batista of the European Commission. Ricardo, a couple of words from you so we can start.
Thank you, Dimitris, and good afternoon to everyone. Many thanks to Capital Link for the invitation, and it's a pleasure to be on virtual stage with you, Dimitris. Ricardo Batista, I'm a naval architect and marine engineer working in the European Commission on the maritime transport waterborne unit, and working mainly with sustainable energy for ships, remarkably with Fuel EU Maritime, and other topics associated to green shipping. In the past, I had experience in classification societies and the European Maritime Safety Agency. So nice to be here with you.
Excellent. You too. Thank you, Ricardo. So I was just talking to Ricardo earlier, and I was telling him that I was very impressed by the organizers of Capital Link, that they managed to get someone, a representative of a regulator to join us today. I was just saying that, there's so many stakeholders when it comes to decarbonization, and usually we spend time chatting, debating, and disagreeing between ourselves, but it's quite rare an occasion to have a representative of a regulator join us. This puts Ricardo in a very difficult position, because I'm going to be taking the position of the market and the various stakeholders, and he's going to have to answer some difficult questions. And without further ado, I'd like to start with a rather general topic, which is that of consultation. The IMO has come under some criticism because there hasn't been enough consultation with the industry, as people say. And Ricardo, I'd like you to use, please, on the consultation with the industry that the EU, as one of the major regulators involved, has gone through with industry. You're on mute, Ricardo.
Thank you, Dimitris. Indeed, consultation and engaging all stakeholders has always been a great priority of the European Commission when it comes to the whole Fit for 55 package. And we don't privilege one over another, because all stakeholders bring different angles and different challenges into the regulatory development and policy making. I believe when we say this, when we state this on behalf of the Commission, of course, the IMO has an even greater challenge to engage with all stakeholders, but also different economic areas and global points. I think all associations are represented typically in our policy development in Europe, and it's not different in IMO. All industry sectors have either through their associative representatives in IMO, they have presence in the main discussions, and they take stake also in the discussions at all levels. In the EU, we have expert groups working on it. We have formal consultations, public consultations. So I believe we can say that yes, the proposal of the Fit for 55 for maritime had very good elements, but it's only made substantial when all stakeholders' input is integrated and considered.
Thank you. That's very useful. So, did I gather correctly that you said that there's also consultation and interconsultation between the IMO and the EU, and that's quite important if it is the case, and horrendous if not, in the sense that the IMO and the EU are the major regulators when it comes to decarbonization at the moment.
Yeah, yes, Dimitris. Important to note that when it comes to maritime transport, only a global perspective is the best for the industry and the best for the business. So the EU is mindful that any initiatives and any policies that impact maritime transport need the global perspective and need the international engagement. And this international engagement at IMO is done with the leadership of our EU member states. Of course, the Commission has an observer status at IMO. We also sit at IMO, but we have the member states coordinating and leading on initiatives and proposals at international level, which to some extent, as you know very well, to some extent they are an extension of what we have as initiatives in the EU, the global fuel standard, the market-based measures also, and the combinations at IMO are to some extent the objective and the goal that we have to go beyond the regional application of the Fuel EU or the ETS. Of course, in this extension and in this vision, we need to take on board challenges also from other member states, from other geographies, from other priorities. And this is a balance of negotiation that at IMO is very important for the EU. We are not, and just to finish, we have not with the ETS or with the Fuel EU reached the end of the line. We're just actually in the beginning of something greater and of global application.
Right. That's very helpful because it brings me on to the next question I wanted to ask you, and it's we've seen the first few months of the application of EU ETS. What do you think? How do you think it's done so far? Have the member states done all they needed to do? Under the regulation, they need to enact a number of things. Have there been any complaints at EU member state level?
So, Dimitris, I will actually revert back this question to you as well, but for an industry perspective and for an operator's perspective. But I'll give you my perspective with regards to implementation. When it comes to ETS, we have already registration for more than 85% of the fleet that is to be scoped under the ETS, with monitoring plans submitted and under approval, and most of them approved. We have already member states doing the transposition exercise for the ETS. Of course, this is something that the Commission keeps a very close eye to with regards to the transposition exercise. We have already expert groups in place in the European Sustainable Shipping Forum to address aspects of implementation that are important to be addressed. We have also, with respect to ETS, several webinars to support operators, member states, the industry in general, in the application of the trading scheme. And we have also a substantial FAQ published that addresses several aspects for implementation. So far, we haven't taken note of any major challenge or showstopper. There are concerns with respect to competitiveness, but these are now addressed at the level of studying how the market behaves in this new context of the application of the cap and trade scheme. So I revert now back to you, if I may. Have you heard from operator side, Dimitris, any concerns or what is the feedback you have also, if I may also ask you?
Yes, sure, of course. Yes, at Dickinson, we've been advising on this for a number of years. We're quite lucky to get there before the beginning of a number of regulations, including the IMO, CII, EXI, and this sort. We've been advising, and when it comes to EU ETS, we've been advising mostly on drafting. I mean, BIMCO have done a good job in terms of a number of clauses when it comes to EU ETS, but parties, following the freedom contract principle, they always try to negotiate and have a bit of an edge, when it comes to that. At the same time, it's all about who pays at the end, and less sophisticated charterers, or indeed even sophisticated charterers, sometimes want to simply just pay. They're not interested in taking responsibility for releasing the allowances and so on. They just want to say how much, and then other questions arise as to how and when, and and by reference to what period you calculate the value of the EUAs and so on. So yes, there's been quite a bit of activity. I have to say, I wouldn't say that there've been substantial disputes yet. I would expect at least a few disputes to arise depending on the stakes. And I think, we're going to get to Fuel EU Maritime very shortly, I think the stakes there are going to be considerably higher. There's going to be a lot of litigation when it comes to that. So that's the current position when it comes to the market, I would say. But going back to who's going to pay, that brings me to the point of we can call, you refer to the EU ETS as a cap and trade scheme, and it is that, obviously. But at the same time, there's a number of people that view it as simply a tax that has to be paid. And I've actually had a number of people ask me, where does all this money go to? I don't know the exact figures, but considering the number of European calls of vessels, we're looking at billions to be made from the application of EU ETS. So do you have any idea where the money goes?
Well, I better have. So because
exactly.
it's indeed.
I'd be surprised if you didn't.
Yeah, I better have an idea. So indeed, so the figures can go, of course, to several tens of billions of euros. It's what we're talking about, and the member states have the majority of the allowances. They have to revert this money back to projects related to decarbonization. So there is this link and there is this obligation. And a remarkable number of those may be, of course, for the maritime transport or ports. The other part of the share goes to innovation fund, related to investment in innovative projects related to decarbonization. There are specific maritime calls now which allow for maritime not to be competing with other more competitive industries. So we have specifically dedicated maritime calls. We already had the first, and this is the way to go forward. The innovation fund will remain a central piece of focusing or refocusing the money coming from the ETS. The member states will also, of course, have a very, very important role here.
Right. That's very helpful indeed. Now, since we haven't got much time, let's go to Fuel EU Maritime, which is your specific area of expertise. Obviously, there is neither the time to explain it in full, nor at the same time should we take for granted that everybody that is watching us at the moment has a full understanding of it. But very shortly, I would just say that Fuel EU Maritime has an emissions focus, and it relates to greenhouse gases and not just carbon. It allows for pooling, it allows for banking and keeping the emissions for the year after. And quite importantly, I found that quite interesting. It refers to the entire life cycle of the bunkers from production to consumption. And even more importantly, it includes severe penalties, which, in terms of rough maths, seem to be considerably higher compared to the penalties under the EU ETS. Although I understand that the EU ETS is completely different to Fuel EU Maritime, the focus on fuel, some industry proponents say that effectively means that in order to comply with Fuel EU Maritime, one has to basically proceed with blending conventional fuel with biofuel, and the cost is going to be substantial. At the same time, there are other challenges, but I'd like to give you a couple of minutes just to go through it all for us.
Thank you, Dimitris. Very quickly, ETS and Fuel EU are complementary. So whereas ETS, by having a price on carbon emissions, will push for energy efficiency, meaning less consumption of fuel, or also for zero rating, also some switch to bio or to synthetic fuels. But primarily the focus of ETS is pushing on the dimension of energy efficiency and consuming less fuel. But Fuel EU acts on something different. It pushes for the use of renewable and low carbon fuels to reduce the greenhouse gas intensity of the energy used on board per megajoule. So on one hand, ETS helps reducing the price gap between fossil and renewable sustainable fuels. On the other hand, Fuel EU gives the regulatory certainty, pushing for investment on the right fuels, on the fuels that will make the most difference in reducing greenhouse gas intensity. Not only fuels, also electricity from shore power is rewarded, wind-assisted propulsion is rewarded, and all this in a well-to-wake basis. So you can really invest on the fuels that make the most difference from an emissions perspective on a life cycle, from the production to the use. As you said, there will be some important penalties to take into account if the targets for Fuel EU are not complied with. But there is two concepts which I would like to highlight in Fuel EU. One is the gradual application, or the gradual stringency of the targets, starting by 2%, 6%, 14.5, and so on. And so we have 15 years from 2025 of application of Fuel EU with rather mild targets. This means that on one hand, it allows ships already operating and businesses already running to have blending strategies, as you said, not only blending strategies, but also hybrid strategies where you can also adopt shore power or wind-assisted propulsion.
And that would deal with the issue of availability as well, presumably.
Yeah. Right. But at the same time, the flexibility measures will allow ships that are not adapted or that cannot find the fuel, together with other ships or other companies that manage to do this, either because they are in a position that can invest already now, they can pool and they can go together for compliance. So it will be very difficult to find someone that is left alone without an option to comply with. Paying a penalty is the last resort. And so we're very engaged in trying to provide solutions for increased availability, scalability for fuels. We have the Renewable and Low Carbon Fuel Alliance with more than 250 members working on matchmaking industry stakeholders to increase the production of sustainable marine bunker fuels at global level. So we're not only talking about Europe, but at global level. No fuel system will be left stranded. No ship will become a stranded asset. LNG fueled ships will have biomethane to blend. Traditional oil fuel ships will have biodiesel and biofuel versions to blend, and so on. And new ships are being built with new energy systems and being prepared for energy transition. I believe it's very important. The regulatory certainty is very important. Fuel suppliers will only invest if they see this sort of regulatory certainty giving them this reassurance.
Absolutely. Of course, I've got to be devil's advocate and say also that, we've got all these initiatives by the EU, and rightly so, all being part of the global efforts towards decarbonization. But at the same time, the burden is substantial. And there's a number of people that believe that because of the EU ETS and the Fuel EU Maritime regulations, the EU is going to be a particularly more attractive place to trade. So Northern Africa is going to be considerably more attractive, where none of these regulations apply. Turkey and other regions, even the UK, and not being part of the EU at present. So what would you say to that? Would the EU become a less attractive place in terms of trade? And if so, which seems pretty obvious, what is the Commission doing to prevent that?
So thank you. I think competitiveness and the impacts have been assessed immediately from the impact assessment studies that were done in the beginning. So we're of course, this is an important point that was considered since the beginning of the proposal. We assessed the impacts, we assessed the positive impacts on the economy from having the new decarbonization to all sectors coming with the Fit for 55 in Europe. There is a substantial impact in terms of new jobs, in terms of substantial positive impact in terms of new jobs, new technology development, differentiated technology development. I think you can be in a forefront position in this highly competitive future market. However, what you say is true. trading patterns are potentially affected and can be potentially affected by bringing regulations which only apply regionally. So we need to see what happens in the boundaries of this region. So we are now studying that. ETS applies, Northern Africa, UK, and others in the vicinity. I wouldn't say evasion, I would just say normal behavior of the market when it sees that can save some operating costs. However, we think that you can save operating costs by deviating the route or by adding one stop, but then you increase the costs at some point in some other parcel of the accountancy of the logistics. So we are now with the study, we are now addressing this point of assessing the impacts on competitiveness. But I must finish with one point, Dimitris, is that we must be mindful that only the global solution will bring a level playing field. And this comes back to your very first question about IMO. This is why it is so important for us to find maybe not the exact same solution, but to find a solution that is fit for maritime transport at global level. And here, the EU, and I reiterate my first words also, we reiterate our commitment in trying to find this solution together with the member states at IMO level. Because indeed, what this question is really, really important to us. We also need to reassure competitiveness of our ports, wherever they may be in Europe. We need to reassure that the prices paid in Europe are not disproportionately affected by all these regulatory pressures. So I believe, however, we are in a transition phase. The
Right. Thank you.
international measures. Yeah.
That's absolutely
Yeah.
right. I think the key takeaways from our discussion, for which thank you very much, is that there needs to be collaboration. We can't really do without it. And at the same time, you know, we should trust the market that it's going to sort itself out eventually in terms of supply and demand of biofuel.
Absolutely.
And so on. Thank you very much again. Thank you all for bearing with us. And that's all for us.
It was a pleasure.
Pleasure here too.